A couple of quick hitters for you, and I just wanted to kind of go through a couple of things that I was thinking about this week that I thought were kind of interesting. The first has to do with charging and the fact that I leave my Tesla plugged in every night or all the time basically because I'm not driving the car. I've only put 4,000 or so miles on it over the last year, so I'm really not driving it very much. So the question is, what should I do? I do leave it plugged in, which is fine. That's exactly what the owner's manual calls for. But the question is, should I be charging it at 240 volts or 120 volts or some other way? Should I be unplugging it, plugging it, doing something else with it? And the answer is actually a little more complicated. It's sort of a nuanced answer. It has to do with the fact that the battery itself manages, or the computer system manages the battery pretty well. So you don't have to continually plug it and unplug it. It will manage the amount of charge that goes into the battery and turn it on and off as needed. Let's take a quick look at the owner's manual about the battery. The Model 3 has one of the most sophisticated battery systems in the world. The most important way to preserve the battery is to leave your vehicle plugged in when you're not using it. This is particularly important when you're not planning to drive the Model 3 for several weeks. When plugged in, Model 3 wakes up when needed to automatically maintain a charge level that maximizes the lifetime of the battery. Note, when left idle and unplugged, your vehicle periodically uses energy from the battery for system tests and recharging the 12-volt battery when necessary. There is no advantage to waiting until the battery level is low before charging. In fact, the battery performs best when charged regularly. That's an important thing to know out of there, and that's why it's always important to leave your car plugged in. Now, as to whether I should charge it at 120 volts or 240, well, generally it's recommended to just continue to charge it. The higher kilowatt hours come from the 240 volts, but again, the system components manage the battery so efficiently that you really don't even need to worry about it. You can just plug it into 240 volts and leave it plugged in all the time, and that should work just fine. It really shouldn't be an issue to leave it plugged in at 240 volts all the time. As long as you're keeping it to between 20 and 80%, that's what matters more than the voltage you charge it at. If I charged it at 110 volts, it would still go ahead and charge, or 120 volts, it would still go ahead and charge and continue to charge the way you'd expect it to, but it really wouldn't be a big deal to do it that way. So I'm going to continue to charge it at 240 volts and leave it plugged in most of the time. So far, I haven't seen any battery degradation or any other issues with it, so I think I'm just fine with what I'm doing. So we'll keep doing it. The second thing was an interesting problem that I saw, and this was something that I saw in a YouTube video that I will link below, where a guy who owns a Tesla took it out and he towed it behind a Toyota Tundra in neutral. So therefore, the wheels were turning and the battery was continuing to charge. And so what he did was, he actually was able to go, he did a lap on a track, and he was able to go another lap on a track just by having charged it by towing the car behind this ICE vehicle. And my first reaction was, this is probably bogus, right? This can't possibly work. And then I thought about it for a few minutes, and absolutely it can work, because this is a DC motor that's actually turning, and by continuing to turn it and using the regenerative feature in the car, in the components of the car, you will actually charge the battery some amount, and it's very, very efficient in the way it charges. Let's talk about that for a minute so you can kind of get a sense of how that works out.
And we're going to be going around together so that we make sure that we're around the same speed as we do this. And so then once we have those baseline efficiencies for each vehicle, we're going to find the efficiency of the Raptor while it's towing the Tesla. And then we're going to do a comparison to see if you use 1 gallon of fuel or 3.8 liters of fuel, how far can each one of these scenarios go? The Raptor alone, the Tesla alone, and then the Raptor towing the Tesla, and then using what energy went into the Tesla to then drive. Okay, so we're going to get our final results here. And so what we have here, and I'm going to put the metric conversions all on the screen so you don't have to think too hard. Taking 1 gallon of fuel, we're trying to figure out, is it more efficient to just take your Raptor or to tow a Tesla and then take the Tesla? So we're starting with 1 gallon of fuel, and based on our testing today, this Tesla on that 1 gallon equivalency of energy, this is a pretty good 8 right there, can go 108.5, wow, look at that writing, 108.5 miles on just 1 gallon of fuel, versus the Raptor, which was 10.7. So literally 10 times as far using the Tesla. Okay, so here's the big moment of truth. How far you towing the Tesla and then taking that Tesla and driving with it. So the math works out, multiply that, divide by that. What do we end up getting? 18.1 miles off 1 gallon, put into the Raptor, converted to energy into the Tesla, and then driving.
So it's more efficient to tow the Raptor with the Tesla than it is to drive the Raptor by itself.
Yes.
We're gonna save the world.
You're welcome.
We are saving the environment here. So the message we've all learned is if you have a Ford Raptor, also buy a Tesla, tow the Tesla behind it, and then you're going to save the planet. That's the way. That's the key.
I'm down with that.
If you pull the car around for 1 lap with the Raptor, you can then drive at a leisurely pace for 5.6 laps.
Wow.
With 1 lap around, you get 5.6.
Wow.
Not a bad deal.
Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good trade-off.
You're really good at math.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay, this is really, really cool, and I wanted to try my own experiment just to kind of show how this works. I have an old DC motor that I have laying around, and it's very simple, but not so different from the Tesla motor. All I'm going to do is hook up a 9-volt battery to it at this point, and by touching the leads to the 9-volt battery, I can make the motor spin one direction. And then I can change the polarity and switch which terminals it applies to, and make the motor spin the other way. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stick a voltmeter onto the leads, and I'm going to go ahead and put a drill on the end of the motor, and I'm going to turn the motor that way. So when I turn the motor that way and I get it to spin, I can see that I get a negative voltage on my voltmeter. That means it's spinning one direction. I switch the drill itself to go the other direction, and I can get a positive voltage going through the same motor because I can have it spin one way or the other. And this is the same principle that applies. In one direction, I'm charging the motor, I'm using the motor to charge a battery, and on the other direction, I'm using the battery to run the motor. That's it. That's the simple principle that's in play here. That's why you get a negative and a positive charge when the motor's spinning. So that's really what's happening in that video. The battery is being used to discharge to run the car, but then being used in the other direction to actually charge the battery. Very, very cool and very simple. Now I want to show one other thing just to kind of lay out the rest of the context here. I have in my house a little solar cell connected to a marine battery. And all I do is I put the solar cell out, I run the leads from the back of the solar cell to my battery, and my battery absorbs the charge that the solar cell is collecting. And over time, that battery becomes completely charged and I can use it to power things around my house. That's the other part of the principle. That's pretty cool, isn't it? That it works out that way is actually pretty remarkable and kind of amazing. So pretty neat to think about when you stop and think about it. It's actually pretty cool. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that Tesla is engaging with Toyota to actually create some vehicles and use the Tesla technology to producing these Toyota vehicles. Now, Toyota has its own version of electric that it wants to do. They've come up with a couple of electric cars over the years that they've disbanded and gotten rid of and whatever. And they were actively fighting the new electric regulations that were put in place in California and didn't want any for the nation either. But yet they were still behind the scenes working on some new electric vehicles. So now it turns out that at least one of their electric vehicles will probably use some Tesla technology in them to be able to let them charge efficiently and use their batteries well. So I'll be curious to see what products they put out there, because this is kind of an intriguing thing that's going on. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was battery charging and sort of that idea of how you charge and how long it takes to charge. I have a friend who was asking me what it's like to drive my Tesla, and I said it's actually kind of cool. And I drove up to Gainesville and back, and it was a nice trip and everything was easy. The only problem was I had to stop for charging several times along the way, and each charge took some amount of time. And that last charge, there was one that took almost 30 minutes to charge. And he's like, I can't imagine stopping for 30 minutes like that. And I said, well, it was great because I had the TV in the car and I was able to take a break and I stretched my legs, and it's more about the journey than it is the destination. And it's a little more intriguing to drive the car, and it's kind of a paradigm shift. And that's where this other thing came up, this story about how charging has gotten better and more efficient, but it's not really there yet. We're not all the way there with efficiency, and all these stations want to put in electric chargers, mostly level 2 type chargers, some with level 3. The level 2, of course, are at about the 240 volts, and the level 3 are much faster and can put many more kilowatt hours in your car. So the 110, 150 kilowatt hour chargers that they have at most of the Tesla Superchargers, those can charge fairly quickly. So I could go basically from 20% up to almost 100% in about 30 minutes in my car. And it's likewise in other cars. And if you have the 250 kilowatt hour chargers, it's much more efficient. It would take like 15 minutes, not quite 1-to-1, but right around there, 15 to 20 minutes to charge up and be on my way again. But there's probably a better way. You may remember that when Tesla first announced its cars, one of the things they wanted to have was they wanted to create a network of battery replacement stations where you would basically drive your car in, let it sit on a rack, and they would actually replace your battery with a fully charged battery, and then you would drive on your way. And they estimated that the time you would be sitting there was between 5 and 10 minutes. So it would be equivalent to getting gas, and it would be just enough time to use the facilities, whatever. And the cost would be, somewhat smaller. These batteries can be taken out of the car and replaced. So theoretically that should have worked, but that sort of never happened. Tesla never went forward with that.
Let's do another one. Now, we searched LA for the fastest gas station, which is 10 gallons a minute.
But in Europe and in China, there are a lot of places that do this where they replace the battery pack out. They'll actually pull it out of your car and put a new battery pack in because space constraints require that you can't really have this network of superchargers everywhere. So instead, they have all these places where you can replace the battery. Now there's a company in California that's doing just that. They're creating a network of facilities that are just like service stations. You pull in and you stop there and you're there for about 10 minutes and it drops the battery out, puts a new battery in, and you can go on your way. So this new battery is already charged. So what they're doing is they're taking the battery packs and just moving them to a location in their facility where they plug them in and they start charging them. So they recharge over the course of whatever time, whether it takes an hour or whether it takes half an hour, they're recharging the batteries constantly. So there's always a fresh battery pack to put in a car. Now, of course, different cars require different types of batteries. So there are some considerations to be made there.
That's why what Ample is doing with their battery swapping technology is going to work for all of those people. The demo that we saw in San Francisco took a little over 10 minutes, but Ample says that by the end of the year, they will get that time to under 5. And that is just as fast, if not faster, than most gas cars.
But in general, it's a much more efficient way to change the battery packs. And they're hoping to go nationwide and start to build this out. Kind of a cool idea. And it would really be more efficient than the supercharging network. And this is where the nature of the paradigm shift will actually happen for this country, when we're actually able to get on the road and travel across country with very little stoppage time. Right now, if I wanted to travel across country, in addition to the 12 hours or 24 hours, 36 hours to get to each destination that I want to go to, it would take, for a couple of thousand miles, it would take me 10, 12 charges to get there, which is kind of crazy. So you think about that and you go, well, what if I wanted to, what if I could just replace the batteries out and could keep on my way much more efficiently? That would be an excellent way to go. And you could still have superchargers and other things along the way. But this is an intriguing idea that I think really deserves a little bit of attention, because I think there's a lot to be said for when this comes to pass. Cars will become much more desirable in that sense because they actually can get there. Look, over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to start to see all these electric cars pop on the market. There's no mid-size SUVs on the market today. Tesla is not making the Model X right now. They've stopped production on it temporarily. And the Model S, they're also not making. So they're focusing all their attention on the Model 3s and the Model Ys because they're really great sellers. But what you're going to find is other companies are going to come into that same space and make a car this size, a little bigger. You're going to start to see pickup trucks. The Hummer is out there, just was released. Now you're going to have, I think there's the Volkswagen company has their bus that they're bringing back as an electric bus sometime in the next 2 years or so. And what you're going to see is start to see some of these mid-size cars where you see an SUV, a small-size SUV, followed by a larger-size SUV that will be part of the platform as well. So you'll see every type of car represented to fill in all the gaps for all the things that don't exist today. It's hard. I was talking about in my last video that it's hard to find something that's a reasonable family-sized car that can still tow some stuff with you, so you can use your space efficiently to be able to get somewhere. There really isn't one. The Model X probably comes the closest among the electrics that are in the moderately affordable range. There are some others that are from some of the more expensive companies, but until they get them all together, this is going to be a problem. So that's why it's really cool that they're coming up with efficiencies and ways to be able to charge, because that's really what's going to make the difference.